Hello and welcome back to Walton on Trent. It's October 2025, the loft is getting cold, and this is episode 2 of Flange Squeal Season 2. I'll warn you now that this episode has not gone to plan. It's been about 6 weeks since episode 1, and that was deliberate to give me a long time to work on my Mk3 coaches. But as is often the case with me and coach projects, I took on too much at once, hit some snags and got stuck in the weeds a bit. I've done it before, but I think I've learned my lesson this time, so we'll run the episode as it was planned and then do my He-Man style life lesson at the end. So enough hot air for me, let's cool things down a bit. Built in 1970 by Charles Roberts Wagon Builders of Wakefield, the fleet of 27 TEA tank wagons were procured by the British Oxygen Company, BOC, to service their newly opened production facility at Ditton to the west of Widnes on the north bank of the Mersey estuary. The 60-foot wagons rode on either GPS or Gloucester bogies and were built with an inner and outer shell with a powder insulation between them. They were the first company-operated trains in the world to carry liquefied oxygen and nitrogen at cryogenic temperatures around -190 Celsius. The wagons ran primarily as scheduled block trains to 3 strategic BOC sites at Sheffield, Wolverhampton and Wembley, later extended to Ipswich, but also appeared in ad hoc and wagon load formations across the country. You could certainly model them in a Speedlink train. Steelworks were major recipients, but chemical and manufacturing plants, frozen food production facilities, and even the North Sea oil and gas fields were also served. However, as Britain deindustrialised through the 1980s and more of the BOC traffic switched to road haulage, the rail flows dwindled and eventually ceased in the mid-90s. 2 of the trunk block trains used the West Coast Main Line through Stafford. The Wolverhampton facility is still there today, but it ceased taking rail traffic in around 1990, leaving only the Wembley-Ipswich route still operating in my era. In fact, the Ditton-Ipswich was the only BOC block train still running at all, possibly including tanks for Sheerness Steelworks, which I guess would have been separated off at Wembley. Northbound trains 6M83 and southbound trains 6L76 were both part of the night scene at Stafford throughout my era. In the September 92 to May 93 working timetable, both were electric hauled, usually by a Class 90. 6L76 departed Ditton at 21:40 Mondays and Thursdays only, and passed through Stafford at 22:51. 6M83 departed Ipswich at 14:25 Tuesdays only, and passed Stafford at 12 past midnight. An additional departure from Ipswich was added on Fridays from May 93, and all trains went over to Class 56 diesel haulage. The contract passed to Transrail in 1994, and although departure times moved a little earlier, the service days and haulage stayed the same. The 00 versions were commissioned by Olivia's Trains and tooled by Heljan in 2017. At the time of filming, there are still plenty available on Olivia's website, but the fairly hefty RRP of £75 never seems to budge. They frequently appear on eBay, some for insane asking prices, and that's where these came from. These were a job lot of 10, but after I sold off the 2 I didn't need, it works out at about £55 per wagon. For a train which only ran twice a week and at night, that's the price I'm more comfortable with. As I said, I've got 8 in a mix of oxygen and nitrogen branding, although I believe they were all interchangeable. Olivia's made 20 variants, so it's easy to build a rake of unique running numbers. I've also got a mix of Gloucester and GPS bogies. The printed detail, and there's a lot of it, is very sharp and probably the standout feature of the wagon, but both bogie variants are nicely done too and should benefit further from weathering to bring the relief out. After that, it's actually a fairly basic wagon. On the tank itself, there are only two fitted parts, here and here. Everything else is moulded, and much of the underframe is one moulded piece. The buffers aren't sprung. I know sprung buffers are a bit superfluous, but they are a tangible sign of higher end rolling stock. At 75 quid, I'd be expecting them here. The kinematic couplers are well engineered, not always guaranteed with Heljan, but the NEM pockets I found quite tight for my Hunt magnetics. They do come with 2 bags of extra or replacement parts. We've got couplers, brake pipes, tank caps, spare handbrake wheels, and that's nice to have, especially as the fitted ones are prone to dropping off, as are these little bits on the end. But separately bagged parts are not the same as separately fitted parts, and it's hard to see how these wagons justify their £75 RRP. They are very smooth runners, and I do really like them, don't get me wrong, but I like them at 50 to 55 quid. I think that's where they should be. If I'd paid full price, I think I'd be disappointed. While this video was in production, Olivia's announced their sale to Rails of Sheffield, although a day or two later, the marriage was off. Just the other night, they revealed they'd paired up with Rainbow of Linlithgow, and the remaining stock of BOC TEAs is now on their website, still at 75 quid. My regular haulage is 9134 in weathered mainline livery for the first 8 months of my era. After that, it hands over to 56019, at least until more Cavalex 56s arrive next year. These are superb models of my favourite diesel, and I think all future runs will get my attention. There isn't any night running here at Walton yet, so we'll all just have to pretend for now. Eventually I want full night operations with mail trains, sleepers, engineers and night freight rolling through, but there's an awful lot to do before then. Talking of which, I was consciously taking a break from station work this month just to give me some much needed variety, but things have still progressed. Little bits first, the planters have been painted black just with a Vallejo acrylic. I want the contents of these to change through the seasons, so full bloom in summer, less so in winter. So I'll probably buy several more sets and fill them accordingly, ready to plop onto the platforms depending on the time of year I'm running. The benches have been painted grey. I think I used Rail Match Flint grey here, and I'm in the process of adding the red frames to match this real world example. This was the standard bench at certainly intercity stations for many years, and Coventry still has them. I tried using just a paintbrush, but I struggled with that to be honest, so I'm trying red paint pens. This one, called Red, actually came out a bit pink, so I've tried dark red here, which initially looked much better but has dried even darker. The one on the right is a total inverse, so painting the red first with a rattle can, and then I'll need to add the grey. I think that's the best colour actually. These benches were so common, it's one of those things that surprises me nobody has ever made accurately. Surely if you can 3D print this, you can 3D print this? Some new detail has arrived in the shape of these billboards from Bunter's Yard. I've sourced and printed the actual adverts, and I'd like a good deal more to place at this end of platform 1. Again, I want an interchangeable range of adverts here. Things from the pop culture of the time really add to the feel of your layout's era. I've also printed some smaller portrait-shaped posters for the platform walls and boards. So we've got all the top films of the era, Christmas pantomime ads, perfume, theatre, beers. These Cream of Manchester Boddington's ads were massive at the time and very clever too. Just for the moment, I black tacked a spare MDF platform strut to the back, and it just hangs on the lip of the brick wall insert here. That makes for an easy swap without damaging anything. The smaller posters will be a bit harder to swap, and I haven't worked that out yet. I've also added these grit bins, one for each platform. These were a pre-painted set of 5 from Bunter's Yard too. No affiliations to anyone on this channel, all mentions are for information only. Deep inside on platform 1 there's a cluster of timetables, and I'd like to have the information points at the same place on each platform. These are die-cut adhesive timetables from trackside signs, and possibly come out a bit on the bold side. The actual text of the real timetables was fine enough to be almost imperceptible from a moderate distance, but they'll do for now. I decided to stick with the thicker pillars down the middle of the island platforms. Pairs of slimmer pillars made the platforms look too cluttered, and the thicker ones do look consistent with the scale of the architecture here. There are a few gaps, they're being labelled up with station name signs and no smoking signs, as it's impossible to do that with them fixed to the platforms. I have opted for slimmer pillars around the stairwells as they look less obstructive as you come off the bottom of the stairs, as well as giving a bit of visual variety. These pair have had signage and platform numbers added, and I'm working on another pair for platforms 4 and 5 in my office. The pillars are timber cut to 8cm lengths. That scales up to about 20 feet high. I have no blueprint to follow here, I've just done it by eye, looking at videos of New Street and Stafford, taking account of catenary height and allowing extra clearance as this is a high-speed station. If you watch videos of New Street, you'll see the pantographs run almost flat. I don't think that would be permissible at 110 mph. The station is also deliberately high and wide to mitigate the piston effect of trains moving through tunnels. If you felt the breeze of an approaching train on the London Underground, you'll know what I mean. Resolving that structural conundrum has allowed me to move on with the first set of stairs. These started out as this wagon load kit. In my 53 years on Earth, I've never seen sets of concrete stairs on the back of a flatbed truck, but thank God someone has, as these make a perfect base for a Coventry-style staircase. I've superglued them together and created a landing with these curious little bits, and then smeared them with some multi-purpose filler and sanded them back. I've done that a few times to get a smooth finish. Still lots of work to do on these, and the thought of handrails winding all the way up to the concourse frankly terrifies me, but if I can nail these, they will be a really striking architectural feature linking both levels of the station. I would like to replicate the wooden handrails here and the opaque glazed inserts. As usual, not a Scooby-Doo how I'm going to manage all that yet, but we'll have a go. I've modified the shape compared to the Coventry prototypes, so mine only turn 90 degrees rather than 180, as this buys me more platform clearance for lighting and catenary. I've done my first mock-up to the concourse level, and I'm really looking forward to working on this level at long last. I will need to extend the stairs at the bottom to raise them up without extending the wings outwards, but I think the scale of them is well within prototypes at Birmingham and Wolverhampton off the top of my head. And the final news is that I've finally finished with the station ceiling. All panels are tiled and painted and in situ. The only area to do is around the stairs, but there are a lot of other dependencies here, so I'll take my time. Fitting around the lift shafts needed a bit of thought, and I also had to pull the shafts up only a day or two after fixing them in, as I wanted to make sure the tiles aligned around them in a coherent way. Unfortunately, that means the lift doors on platform 1 over there are now slightly off the centre line of these two shafts, but there will never be a viewing angle where that error shows itself. It'll bug me forever, I know it will, but I have to train myself to accept these things, and every building has an imperfection. So it's coming on nicely. It desperately needs platform lighting, and there's a ton of detail to add too, not to mention OHLE eventually. It's coming up to a year now since I did my 1960s style episode with my big station plan reveal, and I thought it'd be interesting to put the plans up on screen and see how they compare. With the breakthrough onto the concourse level, hopefully you can see how this is all starting to knit together. This is probably a good time to do a brief overview of the room and layout for anyone new to the channel. You'll find an in-depth tour way back in episode 1 of series 1 if you can put up with my very raw presenting style back then. So it's a loft-based 4-track tail chaser which opens to 8 tracks through the station. The station has 5 platforms and the track layout and all operations are based closely on Stafford Station on the West Coast Main Line. I'm standing at the south end of the layout looking north to where my football stadium, Haywood Park, will eventually be. That's about 26 feet away or a scale third of a mile. A 2-track yard is hidden behind the wall on the right. That's where my 2 container trains live. And a 1-track siding runs up the extreme left of the layout and my 23 wagon aggregates train lives there. At each end, so behind me and underneath the Roots of Britain map down there, a single track splits off and descends via 32-foot 3% inclines to the second level. The second level consists of a single track loop accessing 3 yards, 1 and 2 down on the left, and the whopping 10-track yard 3 underneath the scenic board. There are also numerous sidings squeezed into any available space, and another track runs off the level 2 loop and winds round to the very long dead-end yard 4 over there on the far right behind the layout, where the intercity rakes and coal train live. It's all under digital control using the ECOS command station, and the vast majority of points are managed with Cobalt digital motors. Maybe a dozen or so use surface-mounted motors where space was tight, or I had a point directly over a crossbeam. There are nearly 100 points and motors. You can imagine how much fun I had doing them. The scenic board is 3 foot wide, which was the best fit between this forest of loft beams and the angle of the roof. I boarded out the floor and walls myself, all are insulated, and there was some attempt at a boarded ceiling, although I'm certainly no craftsman. It still gets cold in the winter, I have a fan heater down there, and hot in the summer. The layout is entering its 3rd year, I think, and all the remaining work is predominantly scenic. I've got just about every piece of rolling stock I need to cover all the trains of my September 92 to May 95 era, and they're hauled by a fleet of about 60 locos, 95% of which are sound fitted. The Class 87 is the star of the show, my favourite loco, closely followed by the thumping, screaming Class 56, my favourite diesel. The station is a 1960s modernist building from the electrification era and is on the intercity network, served by both West Coast and cross country, and Walton on Trent itself is a medium-sized industrial city about the size of my hometown, Wolverhampton, or Coventry, whose station is a big architectural influence. I'm actually based in Lancashire, a stone's throw from Exton Junction on the West Coast Main Line. If you want to know anything else about the layout at any time, please drop me a line on Facebook or in the comments below.
Share precious moments. Will I have to wait forever? Will I have to suffer and cry the whole night through? When will I see you?
Despite being conceived in the early 1970s as a loco-hauled coach, it would be the best part of 20 years before the West Coast Main Line's flagship Trent Valley routes went over to squadron operation of Mk3 coach sets. The Glasgow services gained them first, but other routes could consist of just about every coach type and livery available until the late 80s. The Mark III DVT was introduced in March 1989, and from that point on, as Mark I catering vehicles and brake vans were retired or repurposed and routes were rationalised, Intercity on the West Coast quickly became fully push-pull, using single-type coach sets of predominantly, but not exclusively, Mark IIIa stock. I operate two Mark IIIa rakes here at Walton using the Oxford Rail models tooled in 2017. And here's all the essential kit for a 1990s West Coast mainline coach set. Starting at the top, the Mark III DVT. I've got four of the earlier Hornby release, the one without the horrible crease on the cab roof and the dreadful light bleed. That one is chipped and set to run on the tail of a northbound train. The other three you can see are for driving southbound, running mid-train such as a northbound motor rail or DVT failure, and the last one is just for ECS movements. Next, the first open, usually two in a train, sometimes three, occasionally only one, and always at the London end of the train, so nearest the stops and exits at Euston. In the middle, the restaurant first modular, or RFM, with the first accommodation adjoining the first opens. These also ran in Mark IIF sets at this time. At the bottom, the tourist standard open, or TSO, usually 5, often 6, and I've occasionally seen 4. Last but certainly not least, a Class 87 or 90 on the country end of the train, so driving north, pushing south. I'm off to the city of Liverpool to see the Liverpool Phil tomorrow, so these two seem appropriate, and they're also two of my favourites. I bought all the Mark IIIs from a Hatton's clear out a couple of years ago, and none of them were more than about 25 quid. They're nice looking coaches, and I've always found them to be extremely smooth and reliable runners in pull or push formation, but they're certainly not without problems. So before we embark on tarting these things up a bit, let's give them a closer look and I'll show you some of the fixes I've done already. I'm not going to do any rivet counting here. On the whole, I'm happy with the shape and detail on these coaches. However, the very obvious error, everybody knows it, is the colour. If a miss is as good as a mile, the lower body sides are certainly a miss. In certain videos and pictures online, they can look this colour, but any manufacturer worth their salt would have got hold of the correct paint codes for executive light grey and realised that this quite cold mid-grey is completely wrong. The upper body sides are also slightly too dark. They should be falcon grey. Here's a Bachmann Mark IIF for comparison. The central locking lights appeared in 1993, which is smack in the middle of my era, so I'm just going to play the Rule 1 card on those and let them be. But the printed permanent coach letters I don't think were ever on West Coast mainline sets, and the seat numbers disappeared when the Intercity branding went over to Swallow. A very obvious omission is the silver window frames. I found one picture on the internet of a Mark IIIa with no silver frames, which claims to be in 1995, but this would very much be the exception rather than the rule, and would seem a very strange choice to pick for a model. Silver frames were one of the defining features of a Mark III coach. On the coach windows, the no smoking signs are incorrect and too big, and very obviously on the outside. Also, by the early 90s, coaches were all non-smoking rather than half and half. One coach was a nominated smoker, positioned next to the loco, so as far as possible from the buffet, and other passengers didn't have to walk through it. Thanks to friends and allies on Facebook and YouTube for helping me with that detail. The frosted windows at each end are the wrong way up, and the heavy tint on these windows reduces their impact. They should almost be a solid white. And the drop lights in the doors have no metal strip across the top. Finally, you'll notice all the door steps are missing. These drop out very easily, so I removed all mine when I bought the coaches and kept them safe, ready to refit after repainting. I'm going to remove the bodies now and we'll take a look inside, then I'll share my project plan with you. The body is held on with clips, but you'll need to remove the cabling from the coach ends here before you do it. Like the steps, I removed mine long ago and kept them in a box. When you take the body off, you'll almost certainly end up leaving the seating insert behind, which will lead to the coupling mechanism here falling out. There's a reason for that, and a fix. I'll come back to that later. What we're left with is a coloured interior which isn't a million miles away from the real thing, at least on the TSO, but again, if they're going to go to the effort of doing it at all, why not do it right? The seating arrangement is incorrect. There were far more airline style seats in a TSO than we have here, and the seat fabric was more red than orange. The tables and walls are okay, but the mid-coach partition here was smaller and glazed. The FOs and RFM have, I think, correctly configured seats, but the colours are, again, completely wrong. I've no idea where this colour scheme came from. First class seats in the early 90s were a kind of dusky grey pink, and the tables were the same cream colour as standard class. The buffet area has a strange mix of unnecessary and incorrect detail. Talking of which, there's a moulded toilet in each coach, although they haven't added loo roll all over the floor. The saloon ends are fine in the correct ivory cream colour, although first class had a grey carpety fabricy kind of design on the end walls here. Standard had orange and red flashes here, but I think we can forgive Oxford for omitting them. Space for luggage racks is here, and I like the fact that the corridor is at least open to the vestibule. Under the seats there is a recess here occupied by 2 bar weights, and there are channels and holes for wiring. I think the bogies look fine, and the disc brake detail on the wheels is nicely done. If we pop the wheels out, we find pre-fitted pickups which look well designed and certainly don't impede the running characteristics, so that's good to see. These are kinematic couplers centred with a short spring. They're only held in place when the seating insert is fitted on top of them, but the screw which holds the insert in place is far too short, so the moment you pull at the coach body, the screw releases, the seats come away with the body, and the coupler drops to pieces. Here's what I do. Superglue this end of the spring to this little lug here, and the other ends to the hole in the centre of the cam. You don't need much, and don't get it all over the spring or it'll stop being a spring. This will at least stop everything dropping out. Remove the screws holding in these bar weights. I then secure them with a piece of black tack. Now, with the cam mechanism seated correctly, replace the seating inserts and check the coupler still moves freely before securing the seating inserts with these bigger screws from the weights. They'll hold the seating inserts in place now whenever you want to remove the body, which means that your couplers will also stay in place. I've done this on every single one of these coaches and I've never had a problem since. I hadn't found many coach interior photographs to work from, although I travelled on these trains often enough at the time to remember them pretty well. A good resource is videos of trains at night. This gives you a good impression of how a lit coach looks from outside and gives you something to aim for. So let's watch 87022 Cock of the North, departing Crewe in December 1992 with a rake of lit Mk3as. Starting with standard class, notice the cream coach walls and seat frames, red seats, the flashes on the end walls, the yellow tinge to the light from the vestibules, remember they had yellow walls. Here's the RFM kitchen window with activity inside, then a darker ambience to first. Dark end walls, big white headrest covers. In this episode I'm going to do the FOs and the RFM. We'll take a look at the TSOs and DVTs in episode 3. So here's the plan. Dismantle the coaches down to chassis, seating, shell and glazing. Remove and replace the window signage and see if we can do something about the frosted areas and drop lights. Weather the chassis, bogies and wheels. Paint the interior of the shells to an approximation of the prototype, including yellow vestibules. This also protects against any light bleed issues when we add the LEDs later. Paint the seating and tables. Add headrests and covers. Do something with the end walls. Jazz up the buffet area a bit and add some staff. Add some passengers and lighting. On the outside we'll obviously sort the colours out and remove the coach letters and seat numbers, so we'll then need to replace the intercity legends and numbers. put the steps back in, add some light weathering to the bodies, and maybe look at some of those paper coach connectors, although these are very close coupled already. The biggest challenge though will be getting a silver surround to the windows. As usual, I'm winging this a bit, so should we crack on? So I was working on 3 first opens and 1 RFM, and they're not yet finished. I think the general impression is pretty good, although the window frames are much thicker than the real thing, and they're the bit I'm most unhappy with. I'm always my biggest critic, and I unreasonably aspire to a factory finish which few, if any of us, are capable of achieving. I'm certainly not. So I keep looking at the windows and thinking, are they just a bloody mess, and have I ruined my coaches? When I have that little bit of doubt about what I've done, any further mistakes or problems quickly multiply, and I get to the point where I think, I'm just going to write them off and buy the new Hornby toolings whenever they appear. At my lowest point of frustration, I may even think, sod it, just reinvent the layout in BR Blue, what a waste of time, waste of money, blah, blah, blah. And that's kind of what happened right at the end of this project. After a slightly niggly end to my working week, I was looking forward to finishing the project this weekend and doing my big reveal in this video, but the window labels turned into an absolute nightmare. My latent frustration grew and the self-doubt came storming back in. Writing and voicing this bit the following day, and I feel better about the project. The simple fact is, I took on too much at once, put myself under pressure from a self-imposed deadline, which I'd blurted over the internet, and then turned a hobby into a chore. In a nutshell, I choked the enjoyment out of it. But this channel isn't about presenting a false world where everything goes well. It's about the modelling journey I'm on, warts and all, and I'm sure many viewers will have gone through spells like this. If you haven't yet, you almost certainly will do, so I'm sharing this as a cautionary tale. I'm an impatient perfectionist, terrible character traits for modelling, so I have to manage that better to stay on the right side of enjoyment. But let's say positive, some of my most enjoyable modelling weekends have happened when my best laid plans have been upended and I just go up the loft and think, what do I want to do today? And just do it for nobody but myself. And that's how I use my weekend now. There are a few things to finish on these coaches: window labels, passengers, lighting and weathering, and the TSOs will be more straightforward without creating 168 headrests. The window surrounds are tricky, no doubt about that, but the interiors are easy, and unmasking the exec light grey is very satisfying. I'm genuinely pleased with that. So I'll dip in and out of those, or do something completely different, or just run some trains. Next month we'll still be looking at the Royal Scot and the Euston Glasgow services that fly through Walton at top speed. They're what this layout is all about, hopefully with a fully customised rake of Mk3s. And I'm really enjoying putting together episode 4, my Christmas special on coal trains. Until then, thanks so much for watching, thanks so much for listening, and I'll see you soon. Bye bye.